Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Zoom conference titled Business Beyond Barriers, formerly incarcerated CEOs Pave the Way. Everyone at Safe and Just Michigan is thrilled you are participating. We've muted your microphones to ensure that everyone can hear the panel, but please ask any questions you have using the chat function on Zoom. You'll find the chat function on the taskbar when you hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen. For anyone who has not used Zoom before, the chat button is the one that looks like a talk balloon. At the end of the panel, we will gather up and answer questions for as long as time allows. We'll be putting links to an exit survey and ways to get in contact with us on the screen periodically and at the end of the panel discussion, but you'll also be able to find those links during the event in the chat room. For those of you who want to revisit the discussion, we are streaming the event on the Safe and Just Michigan Facebook page through Facebook Live, and will be put up on the Safe and Just Michigan YouTube channel later in the week. You can also engage with us on our social media channels or visit our website. We have a special guest to start off the webinar. Tara Simmons is the co-founder of the Civil Survival Project and just won her primary election and is heading into the November election trying to become the first formerly incarcerated person elected to the Washington legislature. Tara has a welcoming message for us. Tara?
Good evening, everyone. I just want to quickly say thank you so much for joining us this evening and hearing more about the success of formerly incarcerated leaders in the business community who are paving the way for more of our brothers and sisters coming out to have hope and opportunity and doing transformational work across our nation. So often we hear about, our brothers and sisters who don't have hope and opportunity when they're released and oftentimes return to incarceration. And this is an area of passion, and why I'm running for the legislature is because I want to make sure that all people, when they come home, are met with all of the hope and the opportunities needed to be successful. But today, we're not focusing on those stories of the challenges. We are focusing more on the successes that we are finding in a hope that we can offer inspiration to others who are working at the intersection of incarceration and reentry, and also inspiring our brothers and sisters who need that, especially in these really, really difficult times in the middle of a pandemic, and when we are seeing the inequities in our system, just prime and in our forefront. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here and spending this time with us. I know we're all a little fatigued from Zoom, and it means a lot that you are here today. And we have an amazing lineup coming up to share their stories and to share about the important work that they're doing in our national movement. And I am really honored to introduce our facilitator, who is Troy Rientra from, he is the director of Safe and Just Michigan, the outreach director, and also a program director to Nation Outside. So I am so honored that he will be facilitating the conversation and look forward to watching the rest of the panel with all of you. So thank you again for joining.
Tara, thank you. And we're rooting for you and we wish you the best. And we know that you're going to do great things. So we're proud of you. So welcome everyone to this conversation on business beyond barriers. So I'd like to introduce our guests, and please join me in doing so. First of all, I'd like to introduce a friend of mine. We work closely together here in Michigan. His name's Gabriel Blauer. He's the founder of Catastrophic Creations. We also have Marcus Bullock, who I'm going to remind you of the day that we met. He's also the founder and CEO of Flick Shop, and One Degree of Separation with Everyone. Richard Bronson, I'll talk with you a little bit about a friend that we have in common, who's also the founder and CEO of 70 Million Jobs. So welcome all to our discussion this evening, and thank you for being such an inspiration to the community that we represent and we'd like to see elevated. Everybody's mic's working? We all good? You want to do a sound check real quick?
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're good to go.
Good. Okay.
All right.
So here we all are. Just a nugget about myself. I'm also formerly incarcerated. I served 22 years on a life term here in the state of Michigan. I have 35 years with the criminal justice system here in Michigan. I have not been out from under correctional controls or since I was the age of 15. I am on the countdown, 29 days now until I complete my 4-year parole and am done with the system. So that's to be celebrated, and I look to be in the league with all of you one day. So let's talk about our backgrounds, right? Each one of us at some point in our life, we made mistakes, we made poor decisions, and we found ourselves arrested, on our way to prison, in dire circumstances. And so I'd like to just hear a little bit about each of your stories and how you took advantage of the opportunity to get into the right mind space, and what you did to come home and put you in a position to become who you are today. So I'll just do some deference I'll start with Marcus, who I met in Atlanta, Georgia in 2017 when he had his Flick Shop banner up at the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. And, you know, we met Lil
Okay.
Baby
Yeah,
down
yeah.
there. So that's our point of contact. I got one for everybody.
Yeah, you know what? And that was a good time. You know, Troy, it's interesting because I really miss those days when, you know, I had the opportunity to be able to be sitting in a conference room with a bunch of people and talk about the solutions that we're all working on to be able to overcome some of these barriers. So that was a good time down in Atlanta, and I remember it very, very vividly. You know, I'm grateful to, you know, thank you guys again for having me on this. Having me as a part of this panel. This is going to be such an awesome conversation, and I'm grateful to start out. I'll root it. The context of what we're building over at Flick Shop, and a little bit of our story and how we started. I went to prison when I was a 15-year-old kid back in 1996. I got arrested about a week after my 15th birthday, myself and my best friend, who was 16 at the time, and we carjacked a man in a shopping mall parking lot. That decision landed me in front of a judge after that carjacking, with my mom and my sister and all of my family members and church people and my basketball team. Like, they were all sitting there right behind me in the courtroom, and they listened to the judge hit me with an 8-year sentence. And I had to serve all 8 of those years in adult maximum securities. And so, mind you, I'm in the courtroom. I'm like 15 years old. It's like bright, you know what I mean? Like I'm like thinking about, you know, homecoming and like this shirt that my girlfriend bought me and like what I was gonna wear to school, and like we were playing. I just got bumped up to varsity. It was my sophomore year. I'm getting ready to play, you know, in a state championships against Sherwood. Like, that was my life at the time. And all of a sudden I had to learn very, very swiftly what concurrent and consecutive sentences meant. It was a tough time for me in my life. And after 2 years of living in my own delirium about me actually getting sentenced and thinking I was going to come home, because I literally thought I was going to come home like every weekend. I'm like, yo, I'm a teenager, right? Like, surely somebody's going to figure out that they made a mistake and they're gonna let me out before prom, and definitely before, you know what I mean, like the first day of school. And then, like, for real, like Christmas, you really gonna keep me here for like all these Christmases and my birthday? Like, my friends are going, you know what I mean? Like, that was my life. And so when I met my boy Danny B, who had told me he had served 31, that's when it like hit me and my like, oh snap, they gonna definitely make me serve 8 if they'll make my man serve 31 years. And so I got really depressed and hopeless. My mom, she sensed that hopelessness and that depression. She made a promise to me in the prison visiting room to write me a letter or send me a picture every day for the remainder of my sentence, for those last 6 years. And she did that. She sent me a picture or a letter every day. What that did was it gave me an opportunity to be able to see the window of the world that she created. And since then, now that I came home and wanted to figure out how to be able to meaningfully give back, I was able to start another successful business before Flick Shop. And after that, I was able to take the cash from that first business and launch the tech company that does exactly what my mom did for me, which is take a picture, add some text, press send, and for 99 cents, we print that picture and text on a real tangible postcard, and we ship it to any person in any prison, anywhere in the country, to help families stay connected so that we can try as best we can to maintain that sense of family connectivity that we know reduces recidivism.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And so I think the turning point is the support you had, and having those people with you all along the way, and coming back home and saying, I can't do this to them again, nor myself. So yeah, and I have a bundle of my postcards that my wife sent me underneath my desk right here. So maybe
My
in between,
man.
if I get a chance, I might snatch a couple of them up and make the case. Mr. Bronson, point of contact. I have a gentleman named Dan Holbert, who's an early investor in your company. He's now a consultant to Nation Outside, former COO of a company here in Michigan, Hope Network. So tell us about 70 million jobs, and tell us about how you're putting people with convictions to work.
The gentleman that you mentioned doesn't immediately come to mind, but if he was an early investor, he's obviously a very smart guy, and you hang out with only the best people, obviously, Troy. So I salute you for that. But thank you, Josh and Troy and the whole team here for putting this together. It took a lot of work, and I'm very appreciative to be with my brothers and sisters here who, have had events in their life that irrevocably changed them, for sure. My story's a little different, I guess. I'm from New York. I used to work on Wall Street, and I made a lot of money there. At one point, I was a partner in the infamous Wolf of Wall Street firm and participated in all of that insanity. And everybody asked me, was the movie accurate? And, for the most part, the answer is yes. I left that company to found my own company in South Florida, and I grew it into a very large business. But along the way, I broke a bunch of laws. In my case, I have no excuse. I knew what I was doing. I was stupid. I was greedy. I was impatient. And, like so many others, I ended up paying the price. My prison sentence, thankfully, wasn't as long as you other folks. So I hesitate to even compare my experience with yours. I went away for a couple of years. I had paid everybody back prior to being indicted, so that sort of saved my ass. Prison and involvement in the criminal justice system, does different things to different people, and obviously where you go and how long you're down for, affects those changes you go through. For me, it taught me a lot about humility. I arguably was one of the biggest assholes you would have met back in the day. I was making a ridiculous amount of money, flying on private jets, and friends to the stars, and homes and art collections, and I was the chairman of the Miami City Ballet, and on, leading this sort of life that I paid for illegally. But I certainly was riding high. And like a lot of people who go through, at least what I went through, a lot of it was fueled by drug abuse. Particularly when you know what you're doing is wrong, you find ways to sort of numb that awareness, because, it's too much fun to give up, but it doesn't coincide with the way you think of yourself. We all think we're good people. I thought I was a good person, but I was doing things that weren't good, and I numbed that sensibility. But prison, it teaches you lessons, for sure, and it taught me a lesson of humility. It's very, very hard to feel like a big shot when you're scrubbing 100 toilets in prison. It's very, very hard being a big shot when you're eating food that comes from a box that says not fit for human consumption, and the pull date was 3 years ago. It's very hard to think you're all that when you're none of that. And I thank God I learned some of those lessons, because I personally am deeply ashamed of a lot of the things I did, but mostly I'm ashamed by how I acted towards other people and the disrespect and the ego I had. So, I got out of prison. And, it took me a long time to get back on my feet. I didn't know who I was. Was I a successful guy who was just ready for his next success? Was I a home run hitter? Or was I just a guy who only had success because I figured out a way to do it illegally? I really didn't know what path to take. And I wasted a lot of time. But luckily, I discovered sort of a home. I ended up finding a nonprofit organization that I know Marcus is very familiar with. And I ended up working there and eventually became director there. And I was working with men and women, who had joined this nonprofit to find community and find help and assistance and support. And it was very, very rewarding. And it was very good karmically, as far as I was concerned. At a certain point, I became a little kind of disillusioned in believing that despite our best efforts, and indeed the best efforts of lots of other organizations around the country, as far as I was concerned, we weren't having a big enough impact. The truth is that there's a major problem in this country relating to recidivism. 75% of people who are released from jail or prison within a few years will be rearrested. And recidivism destroys lives and disconnects families and shatters communities and creates more victims and creates killed cops, and it creates a financial cost to society of hundreds of billions of dollars, and it directly relates to and correlates to unemployment. So I felt like employment was something that was gonna be my piece of the puzzle to sort of carve out. So I launched this company, 70 Million Jobs, with the idea of being the first national for-profit employment platform for people with records. For-profit because I wanted to attract people who were business people who were driven to make money, who were aggressive and accountable. And that was something a little bit different than the way it had been done. And we did that for about 3.5, 4 years, and we had a lot of success. We facilitated employment for thousands of men and women. I'm very proud of it. And this year we actually began making money, which was I was very proud of too. Unfortunately, the coronavirus had other plans for us because, like every other employment company, particularly ours, took it in the chin. And rather than wait around for things to turn around, and I'm not convinced that's going to happen anytime soon, we've sort of pivoted. And now we are building out a company called Commissary Club. And Commissary Club will be the first social network for the 70 million Americans who have criminal records. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Commissary Club.
Yes, sir.
Where'd you get that from?
Well, as you know, and as Marcus knows, and Gabriel knows, the commissary is a place in prison where you get the stuff you need that they don't give you. And it's mostly junk. It's mostly off-brand, overpriced razor blades and batteries and sneakers from 10 years ago. So Commissary Club is a place where business gets done, but it's also a social place. Because like everything else in prison, you wait online forever for everything. Like an idiot standing there and waiting to go to that one window when it's your turn to go to the commissary. Generally involved, where I was, at least a couple of hours of standing around just socializing. So like our site, which has commerce involved and social involved, that's where the connection comes.
Yeah, that's good. So thank you for that, Richard. So Gabe is one of my local heroes. I met Gabe the day I was married, actually, in Detroit, and at one of the earlier Nation Outside meetings. And he has a very compelling story. And I just want to defer to you, Gabe. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your path along the way that brought you into the criminal justice system. And what was it that said, I'm going to go home and no more?
All right. Well, yeah, my name's Gabe. I had a story. It was definitely more similar to Marcus's. I went to prison at a very young age. For me, drug abuse in high school quickly led to addiction. I was the kid who wasn't able to just keep it to the weekends or keep it to the parties. I wanted to keep going, and basically as soon as I started using drugs, 14, 15, I kind of latched on, and that really became my main coping mechanism. And like Richard was saying, once you start to do some things that make you feel shame, then drugs can be a real smooth way to even that shame out, or make you forget about it, numb it out. And so for me, it was just kind of the spiral where it started out. I would do something like flake out on an assignment for school or something, and I would feel shame, so I would use drugs, and then that would lead me to do the next thing and the next thing, and kind of it became a really quick downward spiral. So at 20 years old, I committed assault with intent to rob while armed and breaking and entering, and I was sentenced to 3.5 to 10 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. So I ended up doing 3.5 of those years, and for me, it was a real rude awakening. I never expected that my behavior would lead to me being locked up, or that I have any real consequences. I'd been arrested, but it was always just kind of probation, slap on the wrist type stuff prior to that. And so, when I woke up in prison at 20 years old, and I was a young 20, I mean, I was a baby face, and I was scared, and just didn't know how I got there, and all of a sudden I wake up sober, and I'm like, how the hell did I get here? And so I had to figure that out, and it took the entirety of the time I was in there to really figure out, basically for me, with the addiction piece, that went hand in hand. There was no way I would have been locked up without drugs, and that was something that couldn't be in my life. So, and there's no way I would have violated all these morals I had for myself, like Richard was saying. There's no I would have been able to live with myself if I hadn't been using. So so that was the first piece for me, was just figuring out how I was going to stay away from that when I got out. And I did that. So for me, that looked like recovery fellowships and stuff like that. And so when I got out, I had a really good fortune, of having a network, having people. Man, that flick shop thing, Marcus, that blew me away, because that feeling of connection, for me, that's what separated. That's what gave me success versus peers I had, that I was incarcerated with. The visits I got every week, the daily mail, the phone calls that my people were able to afford, even though the rates were predatory, was really the difference. And, having that network, having somebody who could come up the week before I got out on a visit and say, hey, I've got a job for you. I put my neck out for you. I put in a good word, and this is a small family-owned company. So I came home to a job, and basically once I got home, I started just kind of, it was starting from scratch. It was, not, I didn't really have a life to get back. I was a teenager prior to that, and I barely finished high school, so it was building a life from scratch. And so I get this job, and eventually I kind of started wanting more, so I went back to school, and I had to apply and go to college and get my associate's degree, get my bachelor's degree. And the whole time, the jobs I would work were never corporate jobs. I never went in and put in an application somewhere of a place I didn't know. It was always, I know somebody who's hiring. I know somebody who has a small family business. I'm going to get in. And so I did a lot of, work with a lot of small companies, and would work my way up to managing these smaller businesses. really family companies who they knew my story and you know, they were from my community. So, so they trusted me. And so once I graduated college, I got a degree in technical writing, and it was just really this pragmatic, practical thing where it was like, this is a job I can get. You know, I could make a living, and I'll be able to get a job. There's no kind of professional licensure I need to worry about having a record or anything like that. So I go to apply for jobs once I graduated, and nobody's calling me back. You know, and so now I'm finally applying to these corporations, these larger places. And the one place that I appreciated was Quicken Loans, that at least, you know, gave me the courtesy to tell me after a phone interview, you know, listen, we like your resume. We're sorry, you know, we can't consider you because of your record. And so for me, that was the story. It was all these small businesses. And it was just, for me, it was a lot of luck and a lot of like persistence. You know, it was not giving up. It was just being open to the different opportunities. So I had a friend who was just starting this business. He's making cat furniture, wall-mounted cat furniture for house cats in his garage. And he needed help, so I came on, and it was me, him, and his significant other, and we partnered up and started this business. This was in 2014, called Catastrophic Creations. And we've grown it now into something pretty big. You know, we've got about 20 employees. We sell online, we sell internationally. You know, we've done pretty good business. The pandemic's been better for us than for 70 million jobs, you know, luckily. I think people have been at home and they're all working from home, and their cats are, you know, bothering them, probably getting on the
Driving them
keyboard,
crazy.
getting in the way, you know. So our furniture helps them get up off the you know, away from them, up in their own space on the wall. And so it's been really good. And it's, you know, it's not like I had this $1 million idea. You know, I'm very humbled by, you know, being with these two guys who are obviously very innovative, with great ideas. But it was just the experience I built from working with all these other small businesses and learning how to manage a company, and then kind of putting in that sweat equity to become, you know, an owner of a business that's pretty successful.
Yeah. Well, one request, I have 2 Rottweilers and my yard is too small. When you gonna make some dog furniture, man? We can jump off the walls and, you know, give me a break. But
Man, we
when you
hear
talk,
that all the time.
yeah, please get to it. When you were talking a little bit about successes, and Richard talked about some of the struggles they had in the pivot. Marcus, I can only assume that you're doing fairly well, given a lot of visiting rooms being closed now, people not being able to have direct contact with their families. So, you know, wish you all continued success, and thank you for just sharing some of your background. And so, Gabe, you started to allude to it and went a little bit into it about some of the challenges. So, you know, there's a number of people who are listening right now who are with us, you know, on the webinar, on Facebook, and to them, I just want to reiterate, put your questions or comments in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we can get those directly to our panelists. But I wanted to talk about, this wasn't an easy path. People think you wake up in the morning and make $1 million. Just like people think you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm going to go commit a crime. Neither one of those are a direct path. There are things that lead us in a wrong direction, that, you know, we start making these bad decisions, they become a solution to a problem, and it works, and I'm not worried about the consequences, and the next thing you know, I'm caught. On the other hand, you're in prison, you come home, you have a label, and now we know that society, we have to face down our stigma. And so some of the work we do here in Michigan is around housing, employment, and removing those barriers. But can you talk a little bit about the challenges you faced along your way in transition before you became, you know, people who wind up in magazines, or people who are being solicited to speak to the people to encourage and motivate them? And I'll just leave that to anybody who wants to answer. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced along the way.
Marcus.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to jump in there. I mean, the challenges were immense along the way. I mean, you're talking about, I was a 15-year-old kid that went to prison. I came home at 23 years old, and I couldn't even really explain where I've been for almost the last decade of my life. I mean, the last grade complete was the ninth grade, right? Like, so there were, a tremendous amount of challenge. I mean, I had a real job before. When I was, before I left, I was a sophomore. You know what I mean? So I didn't know what even the application process would look like. And so trying to figure out how to navigate through some of that psychological warfare that I just learned how to master during the prison. Because, you got to jump through a lot of mental and emotional gymnastics just to be able to make it through the daily, every day of going to prison. Coming home, like it's a new level of gymnastics that you have to play that I had to learn how to play, just in order to be able to make it through the day, knowing that I felt that I was fighting from behind. Whether or not I was fighting from behind or not, right? I felt that. Right, I felt that I didn't know. I felt that I lacked. I felt that, I wasn't ready, right? And all of those mental pressures that I had to begin to put on myself, I had to learn how to figure out how to build systems to fight through that. And that's really what they were. They were systems. They were things that I would do every single day to build habits that will allow me to be able to feel like I was worthy enough to apply. Would tell me no for jobs before I banned the box. So, like when I was applying for jobs, he was like, nah, you got a felony, kick rocks, beat it, scram. Michael Jackson beat it. You know what I mean? And I had to know how to, build the systems to tell you, what are you going to say? What are you going to do if someone asks you this question? What are you going to say? What are you going to do automatically? So you got to know these responses, right? And then what it became a pitch. I didn't even know I was a pitch. It became a pitch. And then what I ended up learning from that experience was that, Marcus, along this journey, first of all, you need to know that there are people that have to master everything that they do in order to be able to get any part of, and this phrase I'm talking about my career, have to get anywhere further inside of their advancement, like whether they go to college or what have you. This is your college tuition. You have this is the taxes that you're gonna have to pay back to the community, back to society, as you learn how to navigate through it. If it takes you 2 years and you winning, dude, you just got an associate's and applying for whatever. If it takes you 4 years, cool beans. If it takes you 6 years, and so now that we're 8 years in with Flick Shop, right? Because now we having conversations about what growth strategies look like, what are marketing strategies looking like, how are we thinking about onboarding and building HR policies for these new team members that we're building on, how to build new tech development plans. All of that stuff happened 8 years later. That's only because I have a master's degree now in building this kind of business. And I had to learn that day one coming out, like, yo, one day by day, just like you had to walk down the 8 years when you was inside.
You have to put this whole experience into context, and a lot of it, unless you've gone through it, is not intuitive at all. It's not obvious. For example, you go to prison, particularly if you're down for a while, the whole nature of prison is they take away decision-making from you. You eat at a certain time, you sleep at a certain time, everything you do, by nature, there's not a great deal of free will that you go through, which is understandable, but the net result is that when they push you out, when it's your time to be released, very often you're talking about people who just have no experience in making life decisions. And when it comes to finding a job, which Marcus just discussed, that you absolutely need a strategy and you need to understand what you're doing, and finding a home, which is complicated for anybody, and on and on. These are all really difficult life events to navigate. There's Jeff Weiner, who was the CEO of LinkedIn. He recently left, and he said he wanted to work on something, what he called the connection gap. When you come out of prison or jail, generally you're released to parole or probation, what they call supervised release. And generally and that could last a couple of years, it could last 4 years, like Troy. And one of the terms of release often is you may not associate with people with records. So who the hell do you know if you've been in prison and you're coming out, your friends were in trouble, you were in trouble, you need help, what do? You don't have someone, now, sometimes you're lucky and someone is gonna hook you up with a job, and someone will tell you, these are good people and I vouch for him, like Gabriel talked about his experience. But Gabriel was very, very lucky that he had people in his corner like, or he had one good friend, and I'm sure he knows how lucky he was, because most people don't have that. Then there's a technology gap. First of all, now you can't get a job unless A, you are very good online, and B, you have the equipment to be online. You know, pretty much everybody comes out of prison, the first thing they want to do is get a smartphone, and somehow or another they get them. They typically get an Android phone with some crummy month-to-month service where they have very little, few hours of download, which means there's a lot of things you can't do. Very few have laptops or access to a desktop computer, which makes the whole process of finding a job or getting an apartment or doing anything just incredibly challenging in ways that you would just have no idea if you didn't go through it. The thing that really is amazing is sometimes someone will say, all right, go to this place, and they're hiring and they know you have a record and they're interested. And I hear it all the time, people don't show up for the interview. And you go, how could you have not showed up for the interview? They knew you had a record, they were ready to hire you, you need a job, how come you weren't there? And then they start, and then you'll get an answer, and it's inevitably a 20-minute answer about why they couldn't make it. With people who are in this situation, typically, they have to go to one friend who's going to get them the bus fare, and another friend who has a pair of appropriate shoes, but he doesn't have a tie, so you got to go to a different friend who's got the tie. And then you got to go here and you got to go there, and then you just missed the bus, so you've got to walk on the highway. When I was out of prison, I never spent so much time walking on highways and roads. And you see a whole part of life you never even knew existed, and people are passing by and yelling at you and throwing stuff at you. It's so demeaning, but just to get to an interview might be the equivalent of, you know, the invasion of Normandy. It's that involved and that complicated. And you end up going on this interview after you've put yourself through hell. And it turns out it's a job that the company has a prohibition against hiring people just like you. So you never had a shot at this job. And you start out with, you're going to aspire to getting a good job. And then you realize, well, it's not going to be so good, but it's okay. And you keep going lower and lower and lower your expectations. And now you're applying for a job at McDonald's. And the kid who's interviewing you is 17 years old. And McDonald's, which is paying minimum wage in Texas of $7, I think, and 45 cents an hour, but they won't hire you full time because then they have to give you benefits. So they're hiring you for 20 hours a week. So you're making pre-tax $150 maybe. And $150 is tough when you have a wife and 3 kids who you have to feed. And you never had a shot for that job. You never had a chance for this terrible, demeaning, low-paying job. Imagine if you had to do that 3, 4, 10, 15 times. What might that do to your sense of pride, your ego? You know, what might that do to you? You know, I mean, I went through it, not nearly that bad, but I see it every day. And I will tell you, that the people who hang in there and keep doing it, if you don't hire them, you're missing out on a class of incredibly heroic people who still have a belief in themselves, their family, the country, you know, the Constitution. They just believe that good things can possibly happen. And to me, they're inspiring. And when I find myself complaining because it's a little too hot today, or I couldn't find a parking spot, and I think about this guy with the family and the pressure that he must be under, with a woman who's a single mom with 3 kids, and, you know, she can't get that job. I just can't even imagine what they go through. And yet they do it, and they come to work with a smile if they only get a chance. You know, I mean, there's a lot of good causes out there, but I got news for you. There's so many heroic people out there who really deserve a second chance, and it's not doing charity. It's doing good for your business when you consider them. So that's if I have one message to leave today, I'd love to impart that.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you framing just the word resilience. That's something that's developed in a person while we're incarcerated. That's something that we have to continue to develop and work through. When you talk about that perseverance, when we're having doors closed to us, um, let me add, just on a note that you do end with, Richard. What would you say to people right now who are looking for jobs in difficult times? What was the best piece of advice that you would give them who may be experiencing that frustration, um, and the rejection? Uh, what do you tell a person like that right now?
Well, first of all, I tell them the truth. It was hard before. It's incrementally much harder now because the country has not come back, even when prior to the coronavirus, when unemployment was at 3.5%, historically low, it was still incredibly hard if you have a record to get a job. Now, when there are tens of millions of people who are unemployed, who don't have records, and companies are barely hiring, but the few that do, like an Amazon, they have their pick of people who don't have records, don't have these kind of issues or drama. That's who they choose. So number one, I'd let them know it's going to be just as bad as you expect, if not worse. Number two, I tell them you have to own your past. You got to walk in, if you're in fact lucky enough to get an interview, you got to look that person, that interview in the eye and not hide anything, not be ashamed, not be apologetic. You got to walk in there and say, listen, before we start, this is something I need to tell you. And I need to tell you that when I was a kid, I made a stupid mistake and I've paid for it every day of my life since. And I've hurt my family and I've hurt my friends, and yet I've learned and I've grown. And I know more in my short life, than most people will ever learn. And if you give me a chance, I know you'll be going out on a limb, and I will reward your faith in me with my loyalty forever. And that's a promise. And look that person in the eye. I also tell people, leave your ego at the door. Whatever you used to do, whatever you used to be, whatever you could be doing now, forget about it. Ratchet it down dramatically. Get your foot in the door. If you're good, they will recognize it soon enough and move you up. If you weren't good, you never deserved it to begin with, and you wouldn't have lasted long anyway. So those are just a couple of the pieces of advice that I have, but make no mistake about it. These are desperate, terrible, dire times. What I say to people, I say, go to school right now. Now is the time to invest in the future. There are lots and lots of, we have a friend at Career Karma, Ruben Harris, I couldn't remember his name, but he has hundreds of classes where you can get involved in the tech world and you don't have to put money up front, and you can learn and you can go to school and be in a much better position to get a job. Now is the time to go to school and make an investment in your future. That's what I'd advise.
And there's resources to get into school as long as they have the technological pieces. Almost everything's online now. You have free MOOC classes. I mean, there's a lot that's available. So good advice. Education is key. It's the key to open many doors. Marcus, Gabe, any words for people who might be experiencing some of that despair that Richard just described perfectly?
Gabe, I'll let you jump in on that.
All right. Yeah, I would say be open. It may not be what you think it was going to look like. And matter of fact, it probably won't be what you think it was going to look like. But, as long as you keep plugging away and keep trying, like, an opening is going to be made. And if you're open to what that is, and, as long as you keep, for me, networking is just huge. I mean, it was really interesting when Richard was talking about the commissary club, because it's like, when we're on parole, we're not even supposed to be hanging out with each other. So that's like Troy. I mean, hopefully nobody on this call dimes him out because he's got 28 days or whatever. You know what I mean? His parole officer is like, he's not even supposed to be going to stuff like Nation Outside because that's us getting together. So the whole system is designed to keep us apart. You know, so I love that networking thing. And that's just like me just getting out and going to a 12-step fellowship. I mean, guess what? That's full of, you know, and I wasn't supposed to be with any of those people, you know, but that's what I needed personally for success. But just being open to what you thought success might look like, that's probably not it, you know. I was just telling my father-in-law yesterday, you know, when I went to prison in Michigan, they had like 3 vocational, you know, you could be a janitor, you could be like a cook of a cafeteria, or you could be a horticulturalist, you know. And it's like, those are the 3 career paths that the MDOC back, this is, you know, 15 years ago or whatever, could see as realistic for an inmate. So, and I went with the horticulturist. I really got into it. I was okay, I'm going to go to school for botany. I'm going to do this and that. And I really developed this passion. That was what I did for work when I was incarcerated. And so the first thing I did was I applied to MSU, and I was like only a couple years out of high school. My grades, my test scores and everything were actually pretty good. There was no reason I wouldn't be able to get in there. But I had this record thing and I couldn't get in. So that was my first idea what success was going to look like. And that was shot down before I even got out, you know. So I just had to keep trying these different ways and, you know, going at it from different ways until I found it. And it took a lot of years, but all that stuff, you know, it was a lot of lessons that happened in those years. It wasn't just failure. It was lesson. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Any words for the job seeker, Marcus?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I could talk a little bit more about the, you know, the business owner. I mean, I've had one job. I remember when I first came home. I applied for 41 jobs before I got the 42nd yes. And that, again, this was prior to Banner Box. So the job that gave me the yes was a paint store that asked the question, have you been convicted of a felony, within the last 7 years? I just did serve an 8-year prison sentence. So I haven't been, you know, convicted of a felony within the last 7 years. And so I was able to get the job. It's the only reason. Same markets as the 41st, 41, the same markets as the 42nd. The only difference was the split me was the comma, right? And so I was finally able to get the job. The one thing that allowed me gave me the grace and tenacity, I should say, to continue to keep pushing along that journey, was that I literally just had a loving and caring mom at home who didn't put any pressure on me whatsoever to go out and like, you got to go do something. You got to contribute to the household. She was like, look, bro, don't go back to prison. It was such a very low bar. Like, just don't go back to prison. You know what I mean? And it was like, you know, everything after that was like, you know, and so what it allowed me to do was, it allowed me to be able to appreciate things in a different level, right? So every time I want to go apply for jobs, I'm like, yo, but I get a chance to be around a lot of women at the mall while I'm applying for jobs, and I ain't been around women in a long time, right? Like it was the simple things. Like I'm able to enjoy a Cinnabon and look at children play and run. And like, yo, I remember when I used to dream about this. I used to argue with Andy and Spider on a pod about Cinnabon and be able to, you know what I mean, get extra ice at. My mom's gave me extra 60 cents to get extra ice. I'm winning right now. Like, this is like, you know, that was the mindset that I had. So I think a lot of it for me was around perspective and allowing myself the grace and be like, yo, listen, Marcus, just a few weeks ago, you were hustling Honey Buns to 2 for $3 in C building. The audacity of you to be complaining that someone ain't give you a shot out here, right? Dude, you're winning right now. Andy and Spider will get their right arm to have your problems right now. And so it allowed me to kind of sort of push through later on, and only because, you know, and I'll probably jump in the gun here, but I do have some same sentiments around some of the barriers around how to start a business though. I mean, because I think that the entrepreneurs on the call and the entrepreneurs who want to think through, like, how do I overcome some of those same barriers? Like them jump through the same mental gymnastics that you would have jumped through. And it's layered because now you're talking about going into an arena that most haven't even ventured into. And so like, you're trying to jump into like a startup culture. But I'll say that to either later in the conversation, or I can jump in now with your permission, Troy.
Yeah, no, that's something that I'm gonna get to that. I just want to lean in with a couple more things, because we talk about the challenges that we face, and one of the things that we see in the narrative around people with convictions on their record is the success stories are very rarely highlighted, but the recidivism is always mentioned. So what about the other percent that didn't go back, that is humbling themselves, that is taking the lower paid job, that is, working to do whatever they can just to stay free, even fighting the internal, that white dark wolf, because they want the temptation is there, but the experience, says no, and the will says no. What about the success stories? What do we have to do to get those out there?
I'm sort of devoting my life to that very issue right now. We're this company whose name is behind me. We're launching in a few weeks called Commissary Club, and it aims to be the first social network for the 70 million Americans who have records. And it is part of it is to connect people, and to inspire people and to feature and provide role models, because there are paths to success and they're not easy. But I have to comment on something that Marcus said. Another piece I think of very good advice. You go through prison, you go through the criminal justice system, you're going to lose friends, you may even lose family, but the ones that you have left, the ones who are not putting pressure on you and letting you stay on their couch, or helping feeding you and always have a positive word for you, those people are saintly, and do not take them for granted. Do not think of them, it doesn't matter if they're your mother, your poor mother went through, I'm sure, hell. And when you're in prison, everybody knows the family has it worse than the person in prison, and what they have to go through, so you discover who your friends are, but be really good to your friends, because, chances are that's all you've got. But what a lot of people have success with is finding a community. There's lots of, nonprofit and community organizations around the country, hundreds and hundreds of them. They do certain things, in my opinion, not so well, but one thing they do very well is they create a community. They create a place for you to go and where you can hang out with people who are not going to judge you and who are going to tell you about the job they got. And, you're going to meet mentors and people in the community. You're going to discover, folks who actually do care. Am I talking too much? Should I shut up?
No. We're waving at Marcus's kids.
Oh, okay. It's bleak, but there are places where you can find human connection. Find it close to you, but you can also, if you have to put out some energy, you got to have a strategy Marcus was talking about. You have to have a plan. It's not going to come to you. You got to drop your ego, be humble, and recognize you're starting from scratch and nobody cares who you were before. You got to, but then again, you have a chance to remake yourself and become a different person, and hopefully a much better person. So that to me is an exciting prospect. Someone asked about startups. One specific thing that I would recommend, there is a accelerator program that my company went through. It's called Y Combinator, and it's generally considered one of the very best, if not the best in the world. Companies like Airbnb and Dropbox and Reddit and many others went through it, but they have a thing called Startup School that you can access online. It's for free, and it's sort of an abbreviated version, and you can take these classes and have access to really geniuses about how do you start a business, because the information is there and it's invaluable. So I recommend to everybody, it's there, learn. It's not magic. You can learn this to maximize your successes.
Yeah, so that is a good segue, and I'm going to load a couple questions in here. I just put something in the chat box that inspired me when I was in prison. John Jay College produced a report called Venturing Beyond the Gates, and they highlighted different prison programs in Coffee Creek, Oregon and Texas, the Prison Entrepreneurship Program. And now we hear about Defy Ventures with Kathleen Rohr. And, you know, there's these different type of places with the entrepreneurial education and, you know, incubators where people can actually develop their entrepreneurial ideas. But so a couple questions. One, do you see value? How impactful do you think an entrepreneurial training program would be behind bars? And what do you say about people coming home and looking to come out of the gate and perhaps pursue their entrepreneurial dreams? And is this a good time to do that now?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, for me, the kind of things you need to know to start a business, it's like, I mean, for starters, they don't even teach you basic life skills in prison. So, I mean, we had to come out and learn about like a checkbook and, you know, all these kind of real basic life stuff. I mean, Richard was talking earlier about the choices and being able to make choices. And the thing I always say is like, I went from, you know, you either get the real cheap state brand toothpaste on the commissary or you get the Colgate. You know, we had two choices. Then you get out and you go to the grocery store for the first time and you're shopping for toiletries and stuff. And all of a sudden there's 24 toothpaste and you got to make that choice. And then you got to go make the deodorant. And all of a sudden there's all these choices for life, right? And we didn't get any education at all on just living skills, period. So I had to teach myself that. And then when we started the business, that's a whole nother set of stuff. I mean, the filings with, you know, the state agencies, how you have to start an LLC. What's the difference between an LLC and an S Corp? What's the difference between an S Corp and a C Corp? You know, should you have a separate bank account for your business? What is a tax write-off? What does that even mean? All this stuff, we didn't know anything, man. I mean, I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree. I minored in business in my bachelor's. I didn't know any of this stuff. And we just had to figure it out with Google and YouTube and a lot of trial and error, a lot of error, to be honest. You know, and it's funny it comes up because I'm just now, my wife is a therapist and she's getting ready to go into private practice and start her own business. And so I've been helping her through that process. And the second time around, it's been so much easier. Just having seen these websites before and having, just knowing the answers to those super basic questions. So yeah, for me, you know, if I was on the inside learning some of that stuff and getting some information, you know, how to access technology, there's so much stuff that would have been very helpful. And also to answer the second part of your question, Troy, yeah, I think it's a great time to start a business. I mean, I've heard so many stories recently about people. It's just a really good time. The world's changing, right? And so we got to change with it. And Richard said in his story, you know, he pivoted, right? That's the word right now, pivot. So, I mean, it's a good time. And for me personally, I had to go through the hard knocks of working with others in their businesses before going out on my own. And you know, I had to be a follower before I could be a leader, all that kind of stuff. But for somebody to get out and want to start their own business, I think it's a great idea because it's like, even if it's the simplest thing of mowing lawns or whatever, you cut everybody else out of the loop who you were depending on to say yes. All those no's, I mean, the 47, whatever the number was, Marcus said, you cut them out of the loop. Don't give them any power. Be your own power, you know? So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And you know, there's an adage that I live: do not despise a day of small beginning. Even if you're selling roses on the corner and you're making $1 profit off of it, you're making money. And so that can take you, it's incremental. You don't wake up at the top, you work your way to the top. Thoughts, Richard, Marcus?
I would just like to interject, you know, I mean, you mentioned Defy Ventures, you know, which I was involved with, and their premise is going into prisons as well as outside to teach entrepreneurialism. So as Gabriel says, you know, you're in control of your economic destiny. That sounds good. And certainly we all know people including ourselves, for whom, we've had some measure of success. But the truth is that it's very, very difficult for anybody to do a startup. People who went to school at Harvard and who don't have a criminal record, it's very, very hard. And they have a high rate of failure. Most startups fail. And then when you add to it the fact that you had limited education, limited work experience, and a record, these are all fairly daunting challenges that just exacerbate an already almost impossible equation. But like Gabriel said, the process itself is almost more important than the outcome, because you do end up learning life lessons that are absolutely critical. And you gain confidence, and you do public speaking, and you learn how do you show up at an interview. Oh, you mean I'm not supposed to be like eating a candy bar while I'm sitting here, or I shouldn't be smoking a joint while I'm talking to the guy? Things that may be obvious to other people. If you don't have the experience, you have no way of knowing that, And going through that process can be very, very valuable. I see it all the time. Part of the problem comes when people really aim so high. It's romantic to say, well, you reach for the stars and all that kind of stuff, but you also have to do something, that exists in the real world. And typically you got to make some money quickly. And the biggest problem is they try to do something that's so challenging and requires a lot of money, and they just can't stay the course. So again, I go back to humility. Humility is a really powerful ally in this process. Start, like you just said, you're interested in the floral industry. Don't go try to open up a store where you have to put down a $50,000 deposit and they'll never give you a lease. Get a flower and go from place to place and survive on your hustle and learn the business that way. That's a good thing. I will tell you the one thing I discovered, and I don't mean to sound like kumbaya here, more than I already have, but I discovered something called honesty when I came out of prison. I never, ever thought a business person should be honest. It's a con, I figured. McDonald's doesn't really have hamburgers that look like the pictures, and the car dealer isn't really selling. He knows the car is going to break down as soon as you get off the lot, but he's got to earn a living. That's part of business. I discovered that if you actually tell the truth, and if your intentions are good and you approach it with a good heart, it's amazing how well things turn out. Now, that may make me sound really stupid, and a lot of people already knew that from, the day they were born, but I didn't know that at all. And coming out of prison and learning a little bit about humility and opening myself up, I discovered that people trust me now more than they ever did in the past, even knowing I have a record. And now I go and I sit with venture capital firms who are giving me millions of dollars, and I tell them I have a criminal record. And they look at me and they shake their head yes, and they go, good. And it's absolutely amazing. If I tried to hide it, if I tried to live a lie, it would come through and it would never, ever work. So be honest, own your past. My attitude is for folks like the four of us who've been to prison, we did our time honorably. We grew from it. We gained from it. We're better people for it. We know things that a lot of people don't know. We gain strengths and wisdom that we can bring to bear in our life and in the workplace. I have on my LinkedIn or my Twitter thing, I said I did 2 years in federal prison honorably. I'm proud of that. And I think it's important that all of us sort of own our past and take pride in it. And it's, it is what it is. It brought me to here, to this moment. It brought us all here to this moment. And you can't separate your past from your present, So I take pride in everything and every lesson that I've learned. End of speech.
Troy, these guys are preaching tonight, Troy, man. They got it on, man.
Look, I almost got started talking about grace and everything. Go ahead.
I'm trying to tell you, man. Like I'm sitting up here absorbing it. You know, that's the thing when you get a bunch of entrepreneurs on a call together, especially folks that who have been through a fire. It's interesting. One of the things I think that Richard said that I'm not going to echo, because all I'm going to do is redundant to what both of them have said. So I'm not going to do that. But one of the things I really appreciate is like entrepreneurship is so freaking hard. Like I'm talking about folks from Wharton Business School. I'm talking about Harvard HBS. Like it's hard. You know what I mean? No matter where you come from. And it's interesting. I did a call. I was on a call with Jim McKelvey, the co-founder of Square, and he was working on another project. And he was talking about we were talking about his book, The Innovation Stack, which was a really, really good book. And he was saying that the project that he was working on, they're 2 years in, they're still trying to figure out how to overcome battles. Now here it is, this is a multi-billionaire and they're still trying to overcome problems inside of their business. And, you would think that with this level of social capital, with this amount of money, you can buy your way out of any problem as a small business owner. And what it did, it showed me like, it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, where you start. If you understand how to start micro and learn how to solve small problems, then you'll continue to grow. And that's what happens with your business. It happened with all of us. You talk about 8 years later, when we start having conversations about Flick Shop. I remember, year 1, 2, 3, oh my gosh, it was crazy. So one of the things that I say to that is like, when we're starting our businesses, Gabe talked about when you're going through that process and you go and you realize that you don't even know what you don't know. And then next thing you know, when you start your second thing or your third thing, like now, like I know, like you said, the LLC versus S Corp and C Corp and versus sole proprietorship and partnership. There was a general partnership. I had shareholders. Did I really have shareholders? Were they actually shareholders? Like there were certain questions that I had, that I didn't know. Third business, now even after Flick Shop, we have the exit with Flick Shop. That fourth business, I'm like, man, this 8 years was like more valuable than anything that Harvard could have ever taught. There's nothing that Harvard could taught me about versus the 8 years of business that I had, all of the failures. Year 2, I invested $12,000 in press releases, thinking that was going to be the thing that was going to shift our business. $12,000 in press releases, right? You know how much business we got out of $12,000? We probably sold like 14 postcards. Each one of our postcards cost 99 cents. I would have never known how invaluable. it was a dump of money, but it was something that I could have learned without it. So don't be too formal. Slow down. First, my second thing is sell at least 3 times. Sell your product or your service at least 3 times before you start a name, before you LC it, before you invest a whole bunch of time and money. And I'm not talking about like family and friends. Like someone who doesn't know you, try to sell that shirt that you want to charge $40 for. 3 different people who don't know you. If you can do that 3 times, maybe then you can come up with a name for your shirt business and then actually spend some money on and going downtown and investing $150 in that LLC, and then getting that SS4 form to get your EIN right, and then taking a trip down to Bank of America and open up your business checking account. And like all of that time and energy and money you're going to invest in this business idea, sell a product 3 times. You're going to sit in your house and give yourself analysis paralysis for 3 months just thinking about trying to make your business perfect. Because like Richard said, like you try to build this big monstrous idea and you feel like this is going to be the one that's going to make me a gazillion dollars, and you ain't launched nothing. Meanwhile, your competitors that have that same exact idea, they like literally jumped out there tomorrow and started trying to sell an imperfect product. They sold one and then they failed on it. And they learned from that. They continue to iterate over and over again because they decided to sell one rose outside of trying to figure out a way to build their credit up and raise all this capital to build a floral shop. Like sell your product 3 times and that's it. And then my last one is to chart your lagging goals versus your leading goals. If you don't know the difference, and I won't spend a ton of time on this, but Google lagging goals versus leading goals. It's so important to be able to not only just have a goal and say, hey, I want to win a basketball championship, because that's what every basketball team says they want to win a basketball championship. But you know who wins? The San Antonio Spurs. You know when those teams, LA, now is for 14 hours every day. And inside of that, because we're going to shoot this many shots, we're going to do this. Chart out your leading goals that will get you to your lagging goals. That's my TED Talk. Sell 3 items, start slow, leading versus lagging.
Yeah, good plug. Check out his TED Talk.
I actually have a TED Talk.
Actually, check it out. We put it in the chat. So first of all, I could ask my own questions all day. We've gotten the context, we've gotten the emotional experience, we've gotten the journey that you've been on, but this chat is blowing up. So I want to make sure that we honor our guests and that you get to interface with them. So I'm going to try to sort through some of these questions, given we have about 20 minutes left. I see a question that Audrey Anderson is asking, and it's a general question, but so have any of you had any experience in your transition with reentry programs and mentors? Did you go through a program? Did you have a mentor who came alongside you? What's the value in a mentor coming alongside you, not only in your personal development, but business development? And we're going to kind of do this as a little bit of a quick fire, because I'm telling you, I got 3 pages worth of questions.
I was involved with as I mentioned, with a reentry program. In the management of it. I didn't go through it myself, and it is called Defy Ventures, and they do very, very good work. They operate nationally, and they do have lots of people who serve as mentors. And I'm too old to have a mentor. That's like a more modern concept, I think. But these organizations have them. And believe me, just having someone in your corner, somebody you can call, somebody you can ask a question to that you're not going to be embarrassed about, someone who's got your back, someone will hook you up with maybe a job. If they're in the industry that you're interested in, it's enormously valuable. The point is, and I think I've heard it from both of these guys and from you too, you got to get out there and you got to do something. And you got to make mistakes. You got to fall on your face. And and pick yourself up and just keep coming. And if you do that, somehow or another, it all seems to work out.
I wish I could unmute Jack Wagner so we could ask his own question, because he wrote a essay of his question. But he said he has so my questions are for each of you. I'll go to.
Oh, can I take a shot at these and I do rapid fire?
Sure, go ahead.
Cool. In each of your encounters in criminal justice, in what era did you commit your crime? I committed my crime in 1996, so it was the era of like, lock those kids up. They are called super predators.
Super predators.
Number 2, how many of you elected your exercise the 6-minute right to go to trial? I didn't. I took a plea for 23 years to life. They wanted to give me a life sentence because they were giving all kids life sentences that were 15, 16 years old. And I was scared to death. Number 3, if your incident was a crime was confined to a single infant, how many charges were you facing for? So I had 17 singular felonies. One of the felonies, because I asked the guy, we carjacked someone. So in the side of that case, I told the guy, get out of the car. Because I told him to get out of the car, that was moving him from point A to point B. So one of those felonies were kidnapping. And it's the reason why that 17 felonies ended up being me facing a life sentence in prison. So that's why I took a plea. Number 4, how many of the charges you face carry mandatory minimum sentences? So I actually got sentenced to one of the mandatory minimums. It was a 3-year, it was use of a firearm and commission of a felony. So I got 3 years for the mandatory minimum. And number 4, that was it. Okay, cool. Rapid fire.
All right, here, I'm gonna pose a different question. Richard Gabe, or this is a pretty easy one. Should sound like unison music to my ears, but it's Caitlin Lynn Rivera Cruz. Once you were experiencing your challenges in transition, did you ever think about going back to your old ways?
No, I didn't ever, man. It was a pretty easy sell. I mean, for me, I would take the difficulty and the challenges out in the world, every day over an easy day out on the yard, and sometimes I do have, when life gets hard and when I have a lot of challenges in life, sometimes I have a weird nostalgia for it. Like, man, this could be so easy right now. I could just be in the day room shooting a game of pool, playing some spades or making some ramen noodles or whatever. And life would just be easy, but that ain't it. Like, being away from my family, the fulfillment I get from answering those challenges in a productive manner rather than antisocial manner like I used to is unparalleled.
I wish I could. I mean, I equate, my life of crime, as a bad habit, and it's hard to give up drugs or drinking or whatever bad habits you have. And I will tell you that I believe that if they continue making my drug of choice, which was Quaaludes, if those were still around, all bets would be off, because I always got in trouble when I did Quaaludes and a couple of shots of Stolchnaya vodka and maybe an 8-ball of blow. For me, that was an evening that was just getting ready to, get exciting. And God only knows what could happen from that, but none of it would be good. But I will tell you, that over time, I discovered, and over, when you reach a certain age, people typically will age out of a life of crime, which is not, it's not well known. And certainly the HR departments of companies really aren't familiar with that. But people, generally just stop committing certain crimes because they're acts that either came out of gang activity or that just require, a certain youthfulness, but they don't commit the sort of crimes anymore. And then they have responsibilities like families. But I will tell you, I discovered that having a good night's sleep is better than earning $1 million. It's better than dating a supermodel and driving Ferraris. It's much, much better than all of that. And, having peace of mind and feeling like, you're sort of atoning. And for me, it's not you're atoning, I'm atoning for behavior that I'm ashamed of. It makes me feel so much better. And I feel like I have a shot of making it to heaven now, where I certainly knew that didn't await me in my past life. So for me, it's not very hard. I can understand it would be hard for someone who can't find a job, for someone who has a family to feed. Who among us wouldn't do anything to put food on the table for the family? And yet a lot of people get in trouble behind that and end up back in jail. But for me, I'm just sort of playing at the clock, and I'm too old to go back to prison.
Yeah, I think this conversation in the midst of COVID-19 and all of the triggers that people are experiencing who have spent time behind walls in a jail or in a prison, being in confined spaces with people when you're not familiar. Imagine the guy comes home today and he hasn't been around his family in 30 years and he doesn't have anything. And, so people are really experiencing. I think this is a real, the point that's coming across is, it was always worse on the other side. It'll never be better on the other side. And I can never forget where I come from. And then the considerations of that are in what I did to my family and those people who cared about me and how this affected me. I got kids, there's so many, I almost have to take me out of the equation now and just say, there's a ride that's happening that I need to get on, and wherever it's going to take me, I'm going to go. But if it's leading me down this direction that I'm familiar with, yeah, I probably shouldn't go that way. And so there is no more gravitating toward the familiar. Everything's going to be unfamiliar, and we can't forget where we come from. So I appreciate, your reiteration of that consideration that people need to go through, like us, in their day-to-day. I'm gonna pose 2 more questions to you, and then just leave it up to for you guys to just kind of free flow it until we roll out. The first one is, as business owners now, do you still see yourself experiencing some types of discrimination as a result of your criminal backgrounds?
Are you seeing that, Marcus?
Yes. And like emphatically, yes. I mean, Right now, we're in the fundraising phase, right? And while we raise capital, you know, I'm still the unfamiliar face of what it looks like to walk inside of a VC firm. The familiar face of what it looks like to walk in a VC firm is not the guy who has a felony written blatantly on his chest and does a TED talk about the felony, right? And then talks about building technologies so for families inside of that same space that's, again, more under. That's just a small example of how what happens, you know, and by the way, we get boxed out and get pushed out of rooms simply because of, in a linear of reasons, right? But they all lead back to the person who I am, the who of who I am. But, you know, as we charge forward, I mean, to be honest, like, I would be lying if I say I didn't expect that, right? You know, and if it wasn't for that, and to be able to continue to fuel me during the easy moments, during the easy times. Like, yo, like the reality of it is that, again, this is hard. And the journey is filled with a bunch of barriers. And I promise you, even as I jump over the next 10 that are in front of me, what I call them in our office, we call them purple problems. When we get out of purple problems, I promise you, they're red ones right around our corner. And as soon as you get through those red problems, I guarantee you, they're orange ones right around the corner, waiting for you, right? So stop thinking that today's red or blue pill is going to be the thing that's going to help solve the problem that you have today and is going to differentiate you from the future success that you think is pending based off of, you know, the barriers that are in front of you. Jump over them joints and keep it moving.
Anybody else? Discriminations, barriers? I'm a homeowner, just qualified for my second mortgage. And
I can't coach my son's basketball team. I'm sorry.
And I also have my wife and I both share 4 rental properties. And today, if I were to go look for a place, there's a very high probability that I wouldn't even be able to rent. You know, so just because you may be experiencing success doesn't mean that you won't still continue to experience the obstacles and barriers of discrimination. So that's another thing that's just going to be part of this ride, but it continues to build us up into what we were purposed to be in the day when we, you know, wind up on the top of the mountain and get to make some decisions, because the slaves definitely outnumber the masters now. Like, you've given too many people convictions in this country. You got 70 million people looking to be employed. What happens when they unionize?
They vote for one person.
Hey, that's what we're pushing for right here in this right now. Just getting the fellow to turn out to vote.
Right here in DC too.
Last question from me, and then, you know, you guys just might want to talk and say some fairly wells to our guest today. So my last one is, in your journey, when we're talking about from reentry to, as my colleague put it, the C-suite, what's the most important thing you learned? It's the most important thing. We need not
that
enough.
I can't do it alone.
Can't do it alone.
Yeah, I love that.
Around me. No matter how much I think I can do it alone.
I love that. You need help. I wouldn't be anywhere without my friends, my family, my network. And that persistence, man, I know it sounds cliche, but you just can't, you can't oversell it. That persistence and that belief that, you know, it's okay to fail. It's okay to get those lessons because you're going to take them and do it better the next time. You have to have them to be able to do it better the next time.
I wake up every morning. I committed my crimes in the early 90s, and I was indicted in the beginning of 2001, 10 years, 8 years after I committed the crimes. There's no such thing, by the way, as statute of limitations, because they can figure out ways to make the crime live on forever. So for me, it's about almost 30 years since I did the stuff that I did. And yet I wake up every morning, every single morning, with this sort of emptiness, this abyss in my gut of sadness and regret and shame for how I chose to live my life. And in a way, it's when I feel the challenges that you were describing, the discrimination against one's past. And yeah, we all are, everybody with a record is living a life sentence. You know, we all are tarnished and have this stigma forever. Things are getting better, but it's still very much that way. And for so many people who have this lifetime sentence, it was from a crime they committed when they were very, very young. Marcus was 15. I come across mostly guys, they're 13 years old, and they did something stupid. Kids do stupid things, except in their environment, maybe it involved a gun. And for the rest of their life, this event will define them. For me, I don't begrudge somebody for judging me negatively, because I have no excuse in my particular case. I didn't do things when I was 13. I did things when I was 35 or 40. I knew better. I had a good family. I had a college education. I was just greedy and stupid and impatient. I have no excuses. And I don't feel like I'm entitled to any. So for me, my punishment far outweighs what I get from other people and their judgment. Is it there? Of course. There's also a lot of racism implicit within the criminal justice system that informs a lot of the decisions and actions that people take when dealing with people who've gone through the system. But for me, honestly, you know, I feel like I had it coming and I deserve it. And I don't know what to do about it, but that is the way I feel.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Richard, Marcus, Gabe, you're making me feel like this is what I bring to work. I want to just take a moment to thank Safe and Just Michigan, formerly known as Citizens Alliance on Prison and Public Spending, for taking the chance on me when I came home. It's the first job I ever had in my life. And I would like to think that I'm doing it well. Also, you know, Nation Outside for giving me a shot. And so now I'm kind of in the vehicle with you guys trying to figure out how do you build a company, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a product, a service, advocacy, it's all the same. And it's not easy. So thank you for sharing your experiences, your wisdom, definitely your emotion, and your guidance and counsel. We do have people asking about if you want to share your contact information. I see some of you have put it in there. So thank you all for joining Safe and Just Michigan and Nation Outside for our conversation, Business Beyond Barriers. We definitely know that there are going to be barriers, but we're going to continue to do business. Even as COVID-19 continues to work its way through our country, we're going to find ways to come together because we know that we can't do this alone. So to everyone who's watching, thank you for joining us. Be well. And from Troy Rienstra, we're signing off tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Safe and Just
Thanks for
Michigan.
having us. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Troy.
Safe and Just Michigan thanks you for participating in today's event. We'll be hosting more webinars, so please keep an eye out for later. On the screen, we have included several ways you can keep in contact with Safe and Just Michigan. We look forward to connecting with you soon. Please consider joining us for our annual meeting on October 8th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be featuring Desmond Meade and Neil Volz of the Florida Rights Restoration Committee at that event. Thanks again for participating in today's panel. Have a great night.